Welcome to Jyske Bank TV. We're here in the middle of the Euro Finance Cash Conference at the Bella Center in Copenhagen, amongst some of the biggest movers and shakers in the financial world. Now, this little guy is the subject of a lot of concern lately. And as markets like China, Russia, and India play a bigger and bigger role in the world economy, the risks associated with trading in international currencies becomes ever more real. So today we ask the question, could it be possible to create a type of standard currency for the entire world that would minimize this risk, a so-called supranational currency? Some believe the answer is yes, among them Belgian economist Bernard Leider, who back in the 1930s proposed the idea of a super currency called the Tera. Since then, other ideas have been floated, such as the DAY, an acronym for the dollar, euro, yen, and a basket of currencies based on those three. And earlier this year, the Kremlin and the president of China proposed this kind of standard currency idea to the G20. Even Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez, never shy, has chimed in, proposing the petro, which would, of course, be backed by oil reserves. Our guest today has his own idea about how such a currency could work. Ian Hillier-Brooke, you're director at WDX in London. Welcome to the program.
Good to see you.
You've launched a new universal currency called the WOCU. WOCU, yeah.
World Currency Unit is
the
what it came
World Currency Unit. It's a derivative based on the exchange rates of the world's top 20 currencies, is that correct?
Yeah, unlike the G20, which is political, we've taken the top 20 currencies by country by GDP, and we weight the currencies by the proportion of GDP of each of the countries in the top 20. So it's a very balanced basket and it's completely apolitical. It's based on GDP, not on any political activity.
So this is a private currency. How does it work?
It's a private company, it isn't a private currency.
Yeah, private company.
We take the top 20 currencies from the countries in the top 20 by GDP. We weight it by GDP proportion of those top 20. And we have an independent institute we've established, the WDX Institute, which has some learned professors, academics, and senior industry practitioners involved in twice a year choosing the countries by looking at the IMF figures. The IMF produce GDP figures once a year and update every 6 months. So we have twice yearly re-evaluations, and we take real-time FX rates so we can deliver real-time WOCU prices.
Great. Now, it kind of brings up the question, what's in it for you?
I have spent 10 years saying to the man who invented it, great idea, but how do you make any money out of it? We believe that the time is now right for us to be able to make money on two models. One is the provision of data. If you look at the Reuters and Bloomberg models, they take their FX rates, they get FX rates from the interdealer brokers. And in the same way, we can provide our rates for the WOCU through data vendors or directly. We're currently providing it directly via the internet. And we can also make money if we took a tiny, tiny proportion of the spread on transactions as banks transact on behalf of corporate treasurers. A tiny proportion of a very large number gives us a decent return on the investment we've made in getting to this point.
So it's kind of two legs to the business model for it.
Yeah,
great. If this is going to succeed, it requires that both parties have a transaction with the WOCU, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
How can you ensure that?
It absolutely requires that, and that's why I'm here. We had an introductory event for the WOCU in London about a month ago, and we had both corporate treasurers and bankers attended the event. And the reason I'm here is to go around and talk to corporate treasurers and talk to bankers, because if the corporate treasurer demands of his bank that he wants to transact in WOCUs, then the banks will probably do it. I know people in the services that provide multiple bank feeds into corporate treasurers to choose their rates. Most of the banks said no to those services until the very large corporate treasurers said, if you don't do it, we'll stop dealing with it.
What about the transaction between companies? I mean, how do we convince, for example, a large American company that now they have to trade in the WOCU?
They don't have to, but if they want to reduce volatility, reduce risk, and reduce hedging costs, it makes sense if you're trading globally.
Okay, and isn't there some kind of a, I guess you could say, mental barrier there to give the dollar?
You're not giving up the dollar. You'll still pay your bills in America in dollars, you can still trade in dollars, but a lot of countries that trade with the US don't want to be tied to the dollar anymore. You mentioned in your introduction the rebellion from the oil-producing countries, other commodity-producing countries. The BRIC countries are growing, and if you look at other ways of trying to do this, they don't work. We involve the dollar in the basket, so the dollar is still a large part of the basket.
Yeah. Let's talk about the IMF. They already have this SDR, and it in essence really was created to solve this problem, I guess you could say. Some of these markets like China, they like this, or they seem to anyway. How do you compete with the IMF?
I don't believe they like the SDR. The SDR is a political instrument. It was created a long time ago. It's only updated once every 5 years, and it only has 4 currencies in it. You can't tell me that the UK is still 22% of the world's economy, but it's still in there as 22% of the SDR. I just don't think it stacks up. It's a political activity, it's not a commercial activity.
Yeah. But doesn't a currency like the one you're proposing at some point become a political device? I mean, can it really be avoided?
We do not expect it to be. We are completely apolitical, as I said. That's why we choose from the by GDP, not for political reasons from the G20. Yeah. And I don't believe it will be, but if the political world eventually adopts it, then we'll go with the flow.
Yeah. Now you said you've approached some banks with this idea and that they're close to or have accepted this.
Yeah, we
Can you talk
are.
a little bit about that?
We are unfortunately under non-disclosure agreements with the banks, so I can't name them, but a couple of very large banks have already said to us that if we turn up in their office with somebody who wants to buy and somebody who wants to sell in WOCU, wants to transact a trade, probably a commodity trade will be the first, then they'll settle both sides.
Okay. Final question here, what are the plans going forward? How long will it take the financial community to begin working with the WOCU?
We had an introductory event to tell the world we were starting a month ago. By the 1st of January, we expect to be launched and up and running.
Okay, and what about
and
longer term?
It'll be traded, it'll be, with any luck, it'll also be in exchanges by then, but it will be very shortly after if it's not by then. And long term, we'll grow, we'll be traded. The interdealer brokers are talking to us. Anybody who deals in FX can see an opportunity as well as see a threat. And they tend to turn threats into opportunities in those businesses.
Great. Thanks, Ian. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks.
Well, time will tell whether the WOCU is wonderful or wacko. But one could wonder if that look of concern, if that look on George Washington's face, maybe, is one of concern. Thanks for joining us.